so because we believe we're not enough, we think that we won't be loved. And then that forces us or pushes us into situations where we stop acting like ourselves because we're so desperate to be loved. So what I did, it wasn't, I think the first things I did to really start to live my courage, and now this is what I encourage women to do, is I started to do big things like you mentioned them in the introduction. But those are the examples of some of the things that we purposely did to wake up our courage. That's what I call it. You have to, first of all, before you can even start tackling the fear in your life, wake up that courage that is in you and become the boss of your fear. That little voice that's talking to you all the time. Well, what if this happens? Like, what if you fall? What if you make an idiot of yourself? Or what if you, the zip line breaks, or, that kind of thing. You need to stop right there and say, whoa, I doubt that's going to happen. So thank you very much for trying to protect me, but this is something I need to do to grow. And I call that becoming the boss of your fear. Like, you're the one in control. You're the one who makes the decision.
You're right.
So decide that you're going to weigh things out and say, okay, what is happening in this situation? I need to grow.
Hello, everyone. This is your man, Michael Yerby. I'm here with a special guest. We're about to get started, so stay tuned. I'll let everyone get in the chat as we about to enjoy our interview right now with an amazing individual, and let's get going. Welcome back, everyone. We're still connecting on LinkedIn, trying to get that squared away. And as we do, I just want to welcome you to Unfiltered Fridays. It's an amazing podcast for you and your friends. Today, we have an inspiring guest whose story is all about courage, change, and finding your true self. Bernice McDonald discovered her brave spirit at age 54 in some pretty wild ways. She went from feeling invisible and not enough to whitewater rafting, ziplining, and even walking on fire to face her fears. That's crazy. Now she's an author, a coach, leading a movement to help midlife women find their purpose and self-worth. Bernice's journey from frozen in fear to brave enough to be myself is proof that it is never too late to rewrite your story. Join us as we celebrate her journey, her impact, and the courageous new chapters she helped others create. Bernice, thank you so much.
Awesome to be here, Michael. I am so excited.
Yes, yeah. You are pretty amazing. Just being able to research you and find out everything that you have done is pretty wow. It lets me know I need to get on a ball. I gotta get things moving in my life.
I think you got a little time.
Hopefully, for decades you carried a feeling of not being enough. I wonder, can you take us back to that time in your life where you finally was around, I think, age 54, that made you step out of the shadows and start a brave new chapter in your life?
Yeah. Isn't that something? Hey, like it took that long. I think that should be an encouragement to all of our listeners here because, it doesn't matter where you are in life. You always can learn more. And it's so important to be able to, recognize that life is training you and teaching you. I actually because at 54, I actually had been through a divorce. I walked through a lot of stuff when I was a child that sort of taught me that I needed to fit in with what, in order to be loved, I needed to live up to a standard, to fit into a box, to be this person. I hated getting in trouble when I was a kid. So, whenever I felt like I was out of line, then I would just quickly adapt. And I think that was good as a child. I didn't get into too much trouble. But what it taught me was that being myself wasn't really enough. that who I was, if I didn't comply with the rules, then I was out of favor, right? So I kind of got into a marriage that was out of desperation because, I had this fear that I wasn't enough and I would never be loved. And I had some bad relationships in there. And then I married someone who probably wasn't exactly right for me. Well, I know he wasn't. So 24 years we were married. It was a difficult time.
Wow.
And when I came out of that marriage, that was probably my first really, really big act of bravery that I took, was just to say, and there were a lot of reasons for that, but just to say, I think I need to take a stand for myself and I need to step away from this. I couldn't see staying in that relationship for the rest of my life. And so in between my two marriages, because I did meet my knight in shining armor, I call him, about 6 years later. And but it was in that time when I took that first act of bravery until I actually met my second husband that I discovered so much about how important it was to be myself, how important it was to say, this is the life I want, and how it was okay to say, this is the life I want. And, faced a lot of fear in that time. And really that was in that chapter was where I really learned to shrink fear down from this fire breathing dragon that I call him. All these knight and castle metaphors here, but that's kind of how I think. I am a fairy tale person, Disney princess person. So I would see fear as this big fire breathing dragon flying around my castle, keeping me like a prisoner. And it wasn't until I realized that fire breathing dragon was actually protecting me. It was a built-in protector. And this one person that I was listening to, a coach who was talking about how to find a good relationship. She told this story about, how because dating's pretty scary. You think it's scary when you're younger. It is scarier when you get to be, 50.
Yeah.
But what she said is you need to look fear in the eye, shrink it down, see it as a separate entity than you. And then you need to, so I shrunk it down from a fire breathing dragon to this cute little thing like a Disney dragon. And it became a partner to me. And she said, you tell that dragon, thank you very much for protecting me. Thank you for wanting to protect me. But in this scenario, my life is not being threatened. So I need you to go over there in the corner and eat a cookie because I need to go ahead and do this thing. I need to grow. That's where I really started to learn that fear is a normal part of our lives.
Yeah.
And it's not something we don't need to fear. We need to feel the fear, but we need to go ahead and take steps anyway.
So I got a question for you. When we talk about fear, and I love the analogies because you said you're a fairy tale girl, when it comes to that. And I sometimes see fear as this, this enemy. For the longest time, I actually did. And then how you describe it is it's not necessarily an enemy. It's like more of an indication, that something is going on. Doesn't mean you have to shrink from it, but it's something. And so I think about that. And for you to be courageous at 54, right, and move on, I got to ask the question, was that an everyday act of bravery for you to take those small steps and during that time to move forward and be personally accountable for who you are and who you want to be?
Yeah, that is just the way it is. That is exactly how it was. It didn't happen overnight. I actually ended up in a worse relationship right after my separation than I had been before. And I had my heart just smashed. Jeez. So, even at 50, well, at that time I was probably 50 or 51. So, but it was when I look back, it was just learning in small increments, taking those tiny brave steps, I call it now, that helped me. Even when I was afraid, even when I did a lot of things to help myself not be afraid, to help myself work out the fear. And once I understood that fear is something that comes up in your body, something that is meant to protect you. Because, I mean, we were given it in our brains because, you know, how else would we know not to step off a cliff or not to, you know, jump off a roof? You have to have something inside that says, whoa, this is not going to end well if you do this, right?
Yes.
But the funny thing about fear, which I had to come to understand, is that fear can't tell. You get the same emotions in your body as when you are going to step off a roof or something like that, as when you're about to do something that feels really uncomfortable. You know, like when you're going to stand up on a stage and speak, you get the same kind of sensations coming up in your body. Well, your brain doesn't know which is life threatening and which is just you worried that you're going to look like an idiot, you know, or that, you know, it doesn't know the difference. And so it's really up to us to take charge at that point and decide, is my life in danger? And do I need to pay attention to this fear? Or do I need to say to fear, thank you very much for trying to protect me, but I need to move forward because I need to grow. This is something I need to do to step out of my comfort zone. And so I need to just take a small step towards, you know, growing and becoming a better person. For me, in that time when I was facing all that fear, I needed to learn a lot of things that probably people learn younger than I was. I had to learn that it was okay to be myself, that it was okay for me to have my own preferences, to like the colors I liked. It was okay for me to find what helped me to relax or to choose what I like to eat. You know, like when I was dating, that was really good practice for me because, you know, it used to be, you know, I would just say, if somebody would say, well, where do you want to eat? And I'd say, well, where do you want to eat? Let's go where you want to go, because I didn't want to displease that person. And I had to learn to start saying, I like Chinese food. So, you know, like I want to go there, like to actually say that was an act of bravery for me. And that was a small step. So those little steps started to really develop my courage, helped me to start to recognize who I am and that it's okay to be me. And that then I can, you know, it'll lead you forward on that path to becoming more and more yourself.
Wow.
I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you did 100% so. And I love it because, you know, I love long form content, just talking and just having a conversation and listening. It's one thing you said throughout both of the questions I asked, where you talked about relationships. And now we know dating this day and age is quite difficult from what we seen when we were younger, right? And now like they incorporate Instagram, all the social medias into seeing who that person is, right? And I had to ask this question, you know, as you talked about it, you know, a little bit where you saying, you know, also choosing to take a chance on love again, in your midlife. And then after those years of self-doubt, how did you learn to love again? How did, I guess, going out there help all the scars you had on your heart?
Oh, man, you know, it's tough. Because, you know, and many, many women, in fact, as a coach, because I've been a coach I had been a coach for a few years before that time. I've been a coach now about 22 years. And I decided during that time to help myself heal, I was going to take some relationship coaching courses to help myself. But what I learned really, like, and I was kind of strange, I think, compared to a lot of women who come out of relationships. I came out saying, I really want to know once in my life what a real love looks like. And even coming out of that divorce, it didn't sour me on love. It's just I recognized the fact that I hadn't found the right person. We were like that round peg trying to fit into a square hole. We didn't work. You know, we didn't work. And part of that was the reason I got married, you know, was I got married out of fear of being alone for the rest of my life. So I thought this might be the last guy that ever comes into my life, which is silly because I was
Yeah.
25. I mean, but anyway, so the way I learned to love again, I first of all believed I could.
Mhm.
That was a big thing.
Yeah.
But then I started doing all kinds of things to help myself. Like I said, learning to be who I am, making that list in lots of ways, but not just a list of he has to be 6 feet tall. He has to have, he has to be like this and like that. I actually looked deeper than that and went and started to think about the qualities I wanted in my relationship. And if I wanted those qualities in my relationship, a safe place to be, I would have to then find somebody who was this kind of person. But that I didn't stop there, which actually was amazing because that's what helped me to become a better person. I started to think, who will I have to be in order to contribute evenly to a relationship like that? And so, man, I did some crazy stuff in that time.
Like what? Like what?
You wouldn't
Tell
even
us one.
believe it. I chased men. I can't believe how I chased men at that age. It was like going back to being a teenager, right?
Yeah.
But I was so desperate. Like I would show up at his door, knock on the door and say, hi, just in the neighborhood. I mean, and I would do things like purposely show up where I knew he was going to be. I started going to the church where he was going and, like things like that.
Yeah.
Just trying to look subtle, but it didn't look subtle at all. And he was not a healthy guy either, So but I'm very grateful for that relationship. I'm even grateful now for my marriage because I learned that it takes all kinds of people, and my ex-husband had come from a very fearful upbringing, and that spilled over into our relationship, which then explained his behavior in so many ways, which I didn't understand at the time. But now looking back, I do. And we have a good relationship now. We've been able to go to all our kids' birthday parties and grandkids' birthday parties together, and we're very amicable. So I'm really grateful for that. And for that other relationship too, that broke my heart so bad, I'm very grateful for it too, because for one thing, I was protected from something that wasn't right for me again. And for another thing, I learned so much about who I did not want to be during that time.
Yes.
Yeah, try to explain to your daughters in their, early 20s why their mother is behaving like this. I mean, it's so humiliating now.
Nah, it's like you said, it's how your perspective, how you see things, right? You could have see all that as bad, but you decided it's a lesson learned in all that.
Yeah.
So that
Which
is
is
pretty
again
amazing.
another thing about fear. Because sometimes we fear that the seasons in our lives when we do really dumb things and make bad decisions, we fear that that's going to ruin us. And a lot of people sit in that shame for so long that they never get out of it. I know people that I've loved very much who passed away feeling that shame still, but we need to realize that life is that path. All kinds of opportunities come our way, surprises like bombs go off in our life, and we have to respond to all of that stuff. Yeah. Sometimes we don't make the best choices, but all of that, if you let it becomes something that trains you to have better character, to decide this is not who I want to be. Who do I want to be? And then you start, you just use those things as building blocks, as milestones to move you along that path and help you become better.
You are so right. I had a friend and I learned a lot from him. He doesn't realize how much I really learned from him. He talked about life is like on a battlefield, right? Where a lot of times, you might go and get hit. And sometimes you have to do triage while you're out in the field. And sometimes you have to really take a knee and go out in the hospital, right? And really learn how to walk again, how to move that arm again. And in life, he said, we have to decide how long we're going to stay in the hospital, how long we're going to stay down on the battlefield. And sometimes we need to understand that we're not Superman or, like an amazing, superhero, that the risk of getting up too fast or too quick while you're not healed, you can cause great damage, not only to yourself, but you can bleed all over other people.
Exactly.
It made me very, I won't say cautious, but it made me more aware, really self-aware of like, hey, let me not always just be that type of person that pushes through, but that type of person that really take inventory of myself.
Yes, so good. Exactly. That's amazing.
And you have done that yourself. Looking back now, what would you say to your younger self, that woman who felt unworthy, who was afraid for so long? If you can reach back through time just to speak to her, what's the most thing you think she would need to hear?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it would be like what I tell my grandchildren now, is that you don't have to do anything to be loved. You are
Yeah.
loved just because you are,
Mhm.
and you are made in a certain way for a certain purpose. The best thing you can do is learn to be you with all of your heart. Just be everything that you're meant to be. And don't hide that. Don't shy away from it. Those gifts, those things that you want to explore and do them. Don't
Yeah.
let people tell you who you are. That should just be between you and God.
Yep.
Those are the only two people that matter as far as who you are. You have to know give yourself room to grow, give
Mm.
yourself time to learn those things.
Mhm.
Like you were saying, you're on a battlefield. I totally love that metaphor because I've seen that often in, like walking the path of life. When you are born, you enter it. When you die, you leave it. In
Yeah.
between, you are on a battlefield. And that's why it takes courage to
Mhm.
live through all the stuff that comes at you, to learn from everything that happens. But shutting yourself down and saying, oh, that person who's very important to me says that I'm this or that, or
Mhm.
I made that big mistake. I can never forgive myself. That is the worst thing you can do for yourself, because you
Yeah.
then just close down that beauty, that deep impact that you are supposed to have in the world. Like with you, Michael, you are, telling me about your leadership and what you do. That is an impact that you have. You have gifts and strengths inside of you that are meant to do that, that job, that to be in that position, to have that influence. It's very important that you develop those things in yourself, that you embrace them, and say, this is who I'm supposed to be. And, where it takes you is even more exciting then.
And that's what I'm really understanding even more. It's like, I feel like, not to always be in the military terms, but I have a mission, I have something I'm trying to achieve, and I don't think I ever get there, and that's
Yeah.
okay with me. And what I mean by that is always self-learning, and it's always giving advice, it's always being there for people. And then I guess learning that everyone is different and adapting to that, right? That one person might want you in their face. Another person might just want you over their shoulder. Another person might want you square 3 meters back, right? And just giving people, I guess, what they need at that time to grow. And so it is that's why I love exactly what you're doing, how you're basically getting women in their midlife who think, oh man, my time is up, it's over, things like that nature. And now they can actually make a change. Man, that is legacy to me. That is 100% legacy. And I think that is amazing. Oh, okay. We have some people saying, what's up? What's up? Hey guys, just to, I guess, real quickly, as we get in the chat is open. If you got questions for our guest, she is a wonderful coach. She helps not just women, she specializes in women, but her life advice is bold and courageous. So please don't be scared. Go right now into the chat and have your questions. We answer them on air if we can, as best as possible. And then also we have her information, so you can, email her and just have a conversation and talk about some things, because life is a journey that we shouldn't do by ourselves. We have family, we have friends, we have mentors, we have coaches, we have motivators, people that inspire us. And so please, please don't be hesitant. Ask your questions. And, yeah, I just wanted to get that out. And, you said you've been a coach, mentor for, I think you said 22, 24 years, if I'm not mistaken. And you mentored and you've seen a lot where you're mentoring women through I would say, the hardest challenges and years of their life. Across those stories of those midlife reinventing themselves, What patterns have you noticed?
I think the biggest pattern I've noticed is the one where like we come to the conclusion that we're not enough, and we turn away from the opportunities we have, even in small ways. You don't go to that social event, or you don't go new. I think that that's probably the biggest pattern. And we were talking about Tony Robbins just before the show. Something I learned from him was that, our two biggest fears in life are that we fear we're not enough. And so because we believe we're not enough, we think that we won't be loved. And then that forces us or pushes us into situations where we stop acting like ourselves because we're so desperate to be loved. So what I did, it wasn't, I think the first things I did to really start to live my courage, and now this is what I encourage women to do, is I started to do big things, like you mentioned them in the introduction. When I found my knight in shining armor, my second husband, and he rescued me when my car wouldn't start, by the way. So he actually was my knight in shining armor. That's how we met. I mentioned to him, I said, as we talked a lot about who we wanted to be as people and as a couple. And I said, I want us to be brave. I want to learn to do brave things because I'm afraid to try new things. And so I said, I've always wanted to do, and he said, well, like what? And I said, well, I've always kind of wanted to go whitewater rafting, but I never have even thought of it. So we talked about it. Next thing I know, he booked a trip for us to go whitewater rafting. So there I was at like 54 for the first time going whitewater rafting. But it didn't stop there. We also went to one of the Tony Robbins events, and we walked on fire, which was just terrifying. And we went ziplining, which was also terrifying because I'm so afraid of heights and didn't even realize how afraid I was. But those are the examples of some of the things that we purposely did to wake up our courage. That's what I call it. You have to, first of all, before you can even start tackling the fear in your life, wake up that courage that is in you and become the boss of your fear. That little voice that's talking to you all the time. Well, what if this happens? Like, what if you fall? What if you, make an idiot of yourself? Or what if you, the zip line breaks, or, that kind of thing. You need to stop right there and say, whoa, I doubt that's going to happen. So thank you very much for trying to protect me. But this is something I need to do to grow. And I call that becoming the boss of your fear. Like, you're the one in control. You're the one who makes the decisions.
Right.
So decide that you're going to weigh things out and say, okay, what is happening in this situation? I need to grow. And so then you start just taking those steps and do the thing anyways, even if you're terrified.
Yeah. We have a beautiful question in the chat. I'm going to bring it up right now. It's how do you deal with life when it seems like you can never get ahead, always feeling behind no matter what? I'll put it up even more for some time so everyone can read it. And it's from a listener, Shameless Hope. I love that name. I love that name, by the way, man. That's amazing. Great. So, it's all you.
Yeah, what a good question. Because, wow, I mean, the thing that I would say when you're in that situation, what you have to realize is that this is only, how we talked about being on the path of life. And there are many chapters in your life, many decades in your life. Yeah. And sometimes you find yourself in a period of time when you can't see out. You feel like you're in a hole and you never do get ahead. But what you have to remember is that it's only a period of time, a small period of time.
Yeah.
This is not necessarily where you're going to be forever.
Yeah.
This is a time when you need to look at what's going on and see if there aren't little tiny steps you could take, one step in front of the other, that might help you to begin to move forward again. And certainly, I've got the, wake up your courage, go and do something brave, something that's out of your comfort zone, just to prove to yourself that you can, even if you don't do it perfectly. And then, figure out who you are and how amazing you are, embrace who you are. And then set your boundaries, start to set your life up the way that you want it to be, even in small ways. And that can be even the smallest ways, like setting up your desk the way you like it, or cooking yourself food that you enjoy, or like start honoring who you are. Put pictures up that remind yourself of how brave you want to be. And then start one small step at a time, moving forward. And you will find yourself moving out of that period eventually. And like you said, Michael, find some help. Get somebody who can give you some advice. Don't be opposed to that or close to that. Somebody is close by who can say something that's going to inspire you.
And you're 100% correct. And I love how you talk about being courageous, right? You're building up something inside of you that no matter what, when you face something, hey, I already got through this back here. Now I'm going forward in this. So great question and great answer. Thank you so much, Bernice. That is amazing. If you have any more questions, please drop it in the chat. Thank you so much. And I just want to let you know, these are the words that's been said, like start honoring who you are, go. Man, thank you so much for your answer. It is being received very well throughout the chat. So appreciate you so much. You talk about, brave enough to be myself is a 30-day journey from self-doubt to self-acceptance. The first of your little book of courage. What inspired you to write this book now? After years of one-on-one coaching and just being there, what inspired you to get out and say, hey, I'm writing this book?
Well, I'm kind of like that person that put the words in the, that asked the question here. Yeah. It's like sometimes you just feel stuck, and sometimes you just got to take, if you listen long enough to your heart and really figure it out and just give yourself some quiet, you start to see something you could do that would help you to express yourself, which I think is really important. And I decided, I'm not even sure how that came up, but coaching is tough. It's tough to get clients. It's tough to, and our world is full of coaches right now. Yeah. So I thought, well, how can I leave a legacy? And I realized through some coaching I got myself that my purpose in life is really to figure out how to do hard things, because I've had to do hard things. And I thought, well, how do I do that? And I love to talk about courage. And so I thought, I'm going to write a series of books called Little Books of Courage that are going to help people to really start to think about in, the little phases that the little problems that we have. Well, they're not little, but how to be courageous within those. And the first one I started with was brave enough to be myself, because that was one of the problems that I struggled with the most myself. These books are so easy to consume. Like I'm making them because, we have a TikTok type of society where, you want to see it's got to be fast. It's got to be instant. So, the chapters are very short. It's a lot of my stories. It's talking about how and it's mostly focused on the reader. When you realize that you don't really like yourself, and then how you move from asking yourself, who tells me who I am? And then, then about choosing courage. Just choosing to be courageous in life, not to let life hold you down, and not to let anybody else tell you who you are except you and God.
No, 100%. You often talk about leading a courageous life, and we talked about it here. And that courageous movement, like you talk about helping women finding purpose, making themselves feel bold in their second half of their life. What is your vision for this movement in the coming years, and how do you build on it through your coaching programs, your communities like Brave Heart Club, and even future books to ignite that change on a large scale?
Well, and I do this in honor of my mom and my aunts when they were young, because I saw them age and get very disillusioned with life. They were so gifted. They could have done, writing is really strong in my family. There was a lot of potential there, but they didn't pursue it just because of the circumstances they were in. It made me really sad to see them not experience what they could have. And so that's what I want for women. I want them to believe in themselves. I want them to see their gifts. I want them to know that there is something special in them that they're meant to do. on this earth. Purpose, like that's my last part in my 4-part pillars, create your impact. When you know yourself, when you believe yourself, when you wake up your courage, that's when you've got those things together. That's where you start to see how you can make your impact, because it's all about who you are. So what I have designed now, and I just have started this a while ago, is I have a place I call Creative Spaces. And it's a free place where women can come online and they can get some coaching, and they can come there and do something, work on a project, do something, like it's just a safe space for them to come and actually express themselves and be who they are. That's the beginning of this movement. Where it's going, I really don't have any idea. I would love to do retreats. I would love to work with women in mastermind groups and that sort of thing to help them get to the next level, to 10x their life and believe in themselves and don't give up at 50. It's not old.
Yeah. It's not.
No.
It's not. One thing I learned is that you can learn from somebody's F-ups or someone's moments of change, right? I personally learn more from people's mess-ups.
Yeah.
But I remember a friend told me, there's not a book of all my F-ups.
Yeah.
There's always a book of, man, I made it through, and it kind of seems daunting. But we do have another question, and I'll show it up right now. It said, what do you say to a person who has great coaching ability and potential business, but is stuck with the fear of failure? My goodness.
We've all been there, right?
Oh.
Every day, even. Yeah. This is where courage is. This is where, because, we're built for courage. We aren't meant to be tamped down or stuck because we believe we're not enough. It's not true. If you've been called to something like coaching, which is an awesome ability, by the way, because what you're doing is you are bringing courage to other people to actually live out their full potential. No matter what kind of coach you are, even a football coach, like when you look at it in the sports arena, you are bringing out the best in people, right? It's a wonderful calling if you have those gifts. So if you're stuck, thinking that you're a failure, that's where you need to realize you need to look backwards, not look at that deep chasm, the gap, we call it, in front of you between where you are and where you want to be. What you need to do is look behind you and see all of the things that you have accomplished. And you need to be very brave and bold with yourself and not shy about that. You need to say, okay, I did this. I did that. I went through that hard time and I came out of it. It wasn't perfect. I was a little scorched, but I came out and I made it through. Or I actually forgave that person. Or I accomplished that one thing back there. That was pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. We all have those things that we forget because they're in our past. But actually the future is fueled by those things in the past, those strengths, because we build on strength. And you will never have the courage to go into a brave future that you want until you start going there. The courage does not show up until you're there. And I'm sure even like being in the military, you see that, right, Michael?
Yeah, 100%.
You're scared to death going into a situation, but once you're in it, you start to find the courage to take again those tiny, brave steps, one step at a time.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. I always, members always told me they take inventory of your life, and I call it the reckoning, right? You looking back at some things that you like and you don't like about yourself. And I always kind of recently learned from being coached. One of my coaches told me, he was like, your past will always be your present until you forgive yourself and able to move forward. And he's like, really, I want you to really think about that, because he said your past caused a lot of pain. And he said, when you look on your past, he said, I promise you the things that you tell yourself about your past really and truly never happened. And I did a lot of research in that. And it's actually true. It says a lot of our pain in our past that we so-called remember is like 80% fabricated.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do we really remember about it versus what really happened?
It's so true.
Yeah.
So true. And also another thing I might add to that What did you learn? Like what skills? Because that's something we don't look at either, is what
Yeah.
became stronger in you because you went through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because where you are now, you wouldn't be that person if you
100%.
hadn't gone through it. And that doesn't just apply to the mess ups. That applies to the strengths and the
Yeah.
things that were, it's like gold being refined in the fire, right?
Yeah.
You scrape off all the stuff that comes up to the top. That's the garbage stuff. But the gold, you have to light the fire under the gold, or the beauty of the gold that never comes out.
Yeah. And it's amazing. You talked about accountability. You talked about your past, how things you went through, and you can look on it fondly and laugh, and you took accountability for those things that happened in your life so that you can be who you are right now, how you're moving forward. And, I love your approach, your blend of heartfelt stories and your practical strategies, especially in your books. For example, I believe in one of your books, in your guides for the readers, you said quiet heart moments along those concrete actions. And how do you balance those emotional side of growth with the actionable steps in your work?
Yeah, emotions, aren't they just the kicker in life, like the killer, if you let them be? What I did was I used something that's called the model. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Brooke Castillo. She put it beautifully, but it's something that is a principle that everybody uses. What you realize is that, like, what I started to see with my emotions, there's this hierarchy. Every emotion has a thought behind it. So I kind of look at it like the thought is like the chair, and the emotions are sort of like balloons that are tied to the chair. Every emotion you have has a thought behind it. And so when you are, that's where you need to go, is that when you feel an emotion, you have to say, what am I thinking? Like, what am I believing is the truth here? Because if you're like that one person who thinks they're a failure, if they're saying to themselves, oh, I'm such a failure, what kind of feelings are they going to have? They're going to be depressed. They're going to be afraid to try anything new. However, if they change that thought to say, I can do anything I put my mind to, or I may not have done that one thing right, or those 10 things right, but that was in the past and I'm a different person today. And I am going to approach this in a different way. The feelings will be totally different at that point. And then what follows is your actions. Acting out of the one thought, like acting out of a thought about being a failure, you're going to do totally different things than if you're acting out of the thought saying, nope, I'm going for it. I can do this if I put my mind to it, or I might fall on my face, but I'm going to learn from this. So that's how I have learned to reconcile things. I, do brain dumps every once in a while, write all my thoughts down and just get it all out and say, wow, all of that is in my brain? Seriously? Yeah. And then you can usually find a couple of things that are predominant there, right? And you say, why am I thinking this about myself? That is not true. You take it, turn it around, make it a strong thought, and let the feelings come from that, and then the actions follow.
See, man, in your book, you posed a powerful question. You said, what if the very traits you're afraid are unfixable and actually your greatest strengths? Can you expound upon that for us?
Oh, yeah. That's the strange jewels. Now, this was something I learned from Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic. She talks about the fear that we have to be creative. Like sometimes we just think that we're too, our ideas are not good enough, that what we're doing, like, if you had fear of putting yourself out there, you never would have started this podcast. Yeah. So, but it's that kind of thing that holds us back sometimes. So what she said, and it really stayed with me, was that we all have sometimes the things that we think are not, are the strangest ideas actually are our superpowers in disguise, and sometimes we've been told as children, oh, you're too loud, or you're too dramatic, or you're too sensitive. You got to tamp that down, and you got to do this, and you got to be this way. But it's those very things a lot of times that become our biggest strengths and the reasons we're even made to, called to do certain things in our lives.
You're right. You're right.
So, sometimes if you've been told, oh, you're way too sensitive all the time, that particular quality can actually be something that makes you very empathetic, where you can sense where people are and you can sense their feelings. So if somebody has been told, oh, you're too intense, you're just always, so out, too loud, too big, too whatever, that person, you can take that quality, turn it around. It can become what we call the strange jewel, and you can become somebody who is full of life and brings life into other people's lives who maybe are too quiet, or they don't have enough, confidence to go out there and do stuff. So you come alongside and you support those people. So I love finding those strange jewels in people. It's awesome.
See, I love that. You also wrote candidly to your readers, life is full of hard things. Our biggest fear is that we're not enough. I'm right there with you. I love that, by the way, how you said that. And it shows you're not preaching, from an ivory tower, like you're living it with them. How important is it for you as a coach to share your own vulnerabilities and journey with your clients?
Interesting you should ask me that, because, I've come through, we came through a time when you didn't do that, right? Like you didn't show your vulnerabilities, especially if you were online, or, even if you were a business person, or, you didn't talk about your weaknesses or the things that frighten you, or the things that, your real stories. But I have realized that is where people identify with you, when you can actually say, hey, I've been there too. I walked through that fire, or I did that, I told you I did some really, crazy stuff there in those years when I was separated. It's like, I can't even believe that was me anymore, but I'm not ashamed to talk about that, because it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the experience. And I think that even when you tell somebody a story like that, I can't believe I did that. That story actually starts to lose its power in your life.
It does. It does. It does. Because people start sharing their story. They're like, oh, you think that's bad? I did this. And you're like, oh, shoot. Yeah, we all, had moments in our lives. Right?
And we will. We will still do crazy stuff and make bad decisions all the way until the day we die. I think understanding that, having that understanding with each other, I think that helps us get through life easier.
I would 100% agree. I looked you up, and on LinkedIn, you summed up your journey in a bold way. You said, I firewalk to find my brave enough, not enough for decades. Now, the author of Little Books of Courage, leading the courage movement like this and literally walking through fire sounds life-changing. How did that experience, walking through fire, kickstart your mission to helping others?
Well, okay, I'm going to be really honest here.
Yes.
When my husband and I went to the Tony Robbins conference, where we actually, walked on fire, I decided I wasn't going to do it. And he works with you all day to prepare you for this. And you don't actually go out there to walk on fire until 11 o'clock at night. And so it's pitch black, and there's all these beds of coals, right?
Oh,
and so all these people are shuffling along in groups, and you're going up to this hot bed of coals. And I said to my husband, okay, well, I'll just go with you, because I didn't want to lose him. We were in a big crowd. I'll just go with you. But I decided I'm not going to do it. Well, we got up to the thing, and the workers there are right in your face, and they're saying, come on, it's your turn next. And I looked at the bed of coals, and I thought, my husband went, and he made it across. And I thought, well, okay, I guess I could do this. And the coals looked burned down. So I looked, I thought, all right, maybe I could. Well, what did they do? They bring a pail of fresh, hot coals, and they put it on that bed, and it just went practically flames were coming out of it. And I go, no, I can't do this. And so the people go right in your face, and they say yes. And so I went, yes. And then they say, now go. And I just went, and I started, and I walked across, and I did it. It was the most amazing experience. I didn't even feel it. I had one little burn on my little toe, but I think because I probably hesitated. Most people don't even feel it. They have no consequences at all. So doing that, I was afraid. Now, this was a big lesson, because I was terrified and did not want to do it, but I had to do it because the crowd was all around me. They're yelling in my face. I just went and I got to the other end and I survived. And that is the most amazing feeling you can ever have, to get through something that's hard and to know you were scared, but you did it anyway. You got through it and you survived. It was like the most empowering feeling there is.
I bet.
That has been something I have gone back to over and over again. Like sometimes when I'm facing something hard, that's not even anything, well, can be big in life, but you say, I walked on fire. I can do this. I did it. I can do this. So
if I did that, I can do this.
Yeah. And now, you know what I teach? I teach from not enough to brave enough. You don't have to go from not enough to being enough. You just have to be brave enough to take those tiny brave steps forward. Like, just go for it. Do something, a little step at a time. And it's amazing what you'll get through.
Wow. You know, and you talked about your husband went first, right? And you told your husband, I'm not going to go, but I'll go support you. And that in itself is brave. And for your husband not to, you know, like, and as a husband, I do this to my wife. I badger her a little bit, and I'm learning not to, right? He, you know, you didn't say he badgered you. So he just understood, okay, you're there to support me? Fine. You don't want to do it? That's great. And left it, right?
He did.
And just let you, you know, as you dealt with that, and then you was able to find the courage to do it. And I noticed in your book, in your bio, because it connected, you mentioned that your husband loves you exactly who you are, wobbly, imperfect, bits and all. That line kind of stuck a chord with me. How did it come to, I would say not it come to, how did he come to that, to accept those imperfect bits of yourself and influence your healing and growth in your life?
Well, I mean, this is one thing I learned when, you know, in my wild time, in my separation, when I was learning all that, what I finally had to do was let go of the fear of not being loved. And so I had to, by doing that, what I did was replace it with the confidence to be who I am, that it's okay to be me, even with all of my wobbly bits, you know, my imperfect, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of wobbly bits and you don't want people to see those. So when I met him, his wife had passed away a year before. And so he was also looking for love. And he had also decided, as I had, that he wanted to find a good relationship. And so when we started to talk and we started, you know, he's just the kind of man that is the calmest guy I have ever met. He's kind of like, just takes things in stride, just accepts what is. And, you know, me, I'm like, you know, the woman thing. And he decided right from the beginning that he was just like, the reason he says he fell in love with me was because I knew what I wanted. And I set my boundaries very clearly right at the start. And I said, you know, things like, I'm not cooking anymore, because I cooked for a lot of years. And so I sometimes cook, I sometimes don't. So I said, you know, I'm not like, don't expect to find a housewife. I wasn't going to be that. And he said, no worries. That's fine. He liked the fact that I knew who I was and that I wanted. And so I think that set the tone, you know, right there. He knew that I was very clear about what I wanted in life and what I wanted in a relationship. And that inspired him to be able to talk about that too. But the one thing I learned in that time was that there are two people in a relationship. My husband deserves to have a life too. This is not just my house. This is also his house. And he needs to have a life. You know, he needs to be able to have some things the way he wants them to be. And so love is not just about me, like give me love. Love, both for both of us, became being brave enough to allow the other person to be who they are. And so when we were at that firewalk, that was like in the first couple of years we were together, and he knew, like, well, he knew I have a very, you know, I knew who I wanted to be. And he knew already that like, there's no point trying to change me, because I just am comfortable being who I am. And so he is the kind of guy I needed, because he just lets me, and he still does.
You know, that's amazing, because that reminds me of my wife. My wife is a firecracker. You know, so she's like, and I tell her, I say, you crazy. She's like, I'm not crazy. I'm like, yes, you are, but you're my crazy. You're my type of crazy, right? because she's just, one thing I fell in love with her is that she doesn't accept no at all. She's very rigid in her spending, right? So if she can get a discount, she don't care if the associate says no. She's going to go up to the manager. If the manager says no, she'll go to the regional manager. If they say no, she's going to go down. She's going to find the president's number or email address. And
So cool.
she does not accept no. And sometimes it was very, very embarrassing for me.
Oh,
But then I kind of learned, like, why is it embarrassing for me? This woman does not accept no at all, right? And she's who she is. And I just really fell in love with who she is. To this day, I tell her all the time, I admire who you are. And I took a lot from her and in my life because I was that scared kid, scared to do anything. And I was like, what's the worst that can happen? I can just say no.
yeah.
Okay. And keep finding your way to yes. So yeah, I thank you for that. Oh, and we do have another question. I'll put it out right here. What does it look like for you to recover from the time spent with clients? Sometimes people's lives are a lot to handle. Oh, wow. That's a question.
Yeah, so true too.
Yeah.
Again, this is where you have to embrace who you are. You have to, I was just talking with someone about this recently. How you fill yourself up is very different from other people. And that's like learning just to know yourself. I was just actually talking, I was talking with two other coaches, and one fills up, they're both introverts. We all figured we were introverts because we like people, but we need to pull away back into, away from people to refill again, right? So the one guy, he likes to refill by watching TV and going for a walk, that kind of thing. I think the lady that I was talking to, she said that she refills by just spending time by herself, like just really quiet, where she has to read a book or do something really quiet. I like to create, actually. What happens to me is, like, I like to go and learn something, unless I'm really brain dead. But I can only spend so much time with people too. And then after that, I need to do something that just fills up my tank. So we're all different that way. And I think it's really important to tap into who you are and to do that, because otherwise you will burn yourself out. And learn to say no. There's a certain point where you just have to say, I can't do one more appointment, or I have to block my Friday off, those kinds of things where you put boundaries in and just say, this is just who I am, and this is what I need to protect. That's where that third pillar that I talk about, is stand up for you. So once you know yourself, then stand up for that and take a firm stand, because that's how you're going to be the best person that you can be in this life. Then you're going to be able to have enough in you to be able to make the impact that you're meant to make.
You're right about that. And, in that, someone talked about, it's like they said, free. He said, you are the governor of your own mind state, or your state of mind. And that is so true. Free World Press. You are 100% correct. And that's exactly what you're saying. It's like, you need to know your own peace. So before we get out of here, though, floor is yours. Tell us exactly what you got going on so we can support you, and everyone can know, so we can share to our friends and family out there as well.
Yeah, thank you. And this has been so fun. And I was going to say, it sounds like your wife has some strange jewels there that actually are strengths, like what some people would consider to be, sometimes a bit annoying, is actually a strength for her. And look how she has supported you and helped you to, learn to stand up for yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
So if anybody wants to, follow me, I have started a YouTube channel, Bernice McDonald. I have my website, bernicemcdonald.com. And actually, I wanted to say, I just have this here. I don't know if you can see it. This is the cover. I have this. It's called the Tiny Brave Steps Generator. If you go to my website, it's a pop-up that comes up. And what it is a couple of AI prompts that you can copy and put in. And you actually put your, like, what you're struggling with in there. And AI will actually then generate 3 tiny brave steps that you can take next. And it becomes like your coach. So if you're interested in actually, if you're stuck or if you're struggling and certain, you have questions about yourself, or even, am I a valid person? You know, whatever the problem is, it leads you through, helps you to identify your problem, how you feel about it, what you've tried so far. And then it actually processes some of the stuff that I have, and it will spit out a plan for you. So
Wow.
yeah, I have found it myself. I love to use it. That's why I wanted to share it with people, because, you know, sometimes we just need to know what to do next. What is that tiny little step? And my first step is always only 90 seconds long. So pick something where you are like, okay, light a candle, you know, that takes 90 seconds, or, you know, get dressed. That only takes 90 seconds. So
Yep.
then you can take, you know, the next 2 steps after that.
So wow, that's amazing. So guys, go out there. She's allowing a generator for free. And then so once you get that plan, you're gonna need a coach. I mean, it's no way around it. You're gonna need a coach to help you execute. That's the job of a coach, to motivate, to inspire, to actually give, I want to say to give confirmation to
Yeah.
that plan of action, right? So
Yeah.
you guys can execute. So please look Bernice up. For her to actually share this generator for free is amazing, because, you know, most coaches charge a premium price. So for her just to really want to help you guys out, it's just amazing. So please do not be scared. Flood her website, ask her questions. She's there
Yeah.
to help
Love it.
out accordingly. And also get her books. Man, it is amazing. Her series is bar none. I love to read. So I'm going to be in her books even more, as I try to read a book a week. And since they're small books, you can get through it within a couple of days, easy. So no problem there. Thank you so much, Bernice, for being on the show. I really, really
Awesome.
appreciate
So
you.
nice
You've
to
been a
meet you,
blessing.
Michael,
Oh
and your
man,
followers. That's awesome. I wish you all the best in your new endeavors coming up too. You
yes,
are a
man.
brave man.
Nothing. I'm nothing. All right, guys. I love you. You have a wonderful day. Peace.